Here's the case of optimal zero pollution. And here's what has to happen. The costs of pollution have to be really, really high. If that's true, then the optimal level of pollution may indeed be zero. Okay, an example of that might be chemicals in groundwater, caused by a production activity that would cause death to anyone who consumed the water in the area. So, let's say you have a production process that leaches arsenic into the groundwater. Anybody that drinks the groundwater dies from it. That's pretty bad. And that's a big negative effect that we might want to just ban outright, just prevent people from using it completely. Well, here's how it's got to look then. And here's a case where that exactly is the best outcome. Suppose here's the supply and demand of a product in a typical market. Price would be here. I'm sorry, the quantity, the private price, PPVT, would be here. But the externality cost is this distance right here. It's really, really high. So that it's so high that if we were to find where does that social cost intersect the demand curve, it doesn't. Or it does, if you will, at a level of production 0. So let's really quickly evaluate the costs and benefits of putting an optimal tax, which is a prohibitive tax in this particular case. We're going to eliminate the activity completely. What do? The change in consumer surplus is going to be area minus B. The change in producer surplus, producers are going to lose out negative C. The government revenue effect, well, the government doesn't collect anything if they tax it so high that nobody consumes or produces anything. It's going to be 0. But the externality effect is going to be a positive A plus B plus C plus D. Okay, you're going to get this whole benefit right here times the level of production that you're eliminating. Okay, and so you're going to generate, by eliminating the pollution, these benefits. Now, we add it up together. B's cancel, the C's cancel, and we're going to left with a plus A plus D. All right, so in this case, a tax that eliminates the activity completely is the optimal level, but it's only going to be the optimal level if we can assure ourselves that the costs of doing that are indeed, really, really high enough to overwhelm the positive benefits that can accrue. Now, there's an alternative policy you can use. A tax might be difficult to implement here. You don't know exactly, and you know exactly what you want to achieve. You want to get 0 production of that particular good. So an alternative policy that would generate that same outcome is a production ban. Just say, you can't produce this, you can't sell it, you can't use this product. If the government did that, same welfare effects are going to apply. Going to generate a long-term benefit or a benefit for the economy overall, because the A&D is still going to be your leftover result. But I want to highlight something else here that arises. And I want to highlight that this is something we do in some contexts. So for example, we've got policies on the use, consumption, and production of drugs. And we've got a lot of drugs that have been classified as illegal. We just can't buy or sell them. And as a result of that, what's the effect of putting a prohibitive production ban in place on a substance like illegal drugs, marijuana, heroin, and things of that sort? Well, one thing that's going to do is it's going to create the potential for a lot of profit in the marketplace. There's a lot of surplus value that's still out there. And if you cheat in that particular circumstance, if you're willing to sell a product despite the fact that it's been made illegal, you've got the possibility that you can make a huge amount of money from that. So one of the things that this ban does is it actually increases the incentives to participate in the market, because you're not going to be down here at a price PVT in the early stages of people just willing to break the ban and sell illegally. You're going to have the chance to make an enormous amount of money. And that is something we've seen happen in the drugs trade, right? So, the price of heroin is really high, and there's a lot of people who are making a ton of money despite the fact that heroin is illegal and you're just not supposed to do it. So how do we avoid the illegalities? How do we avoid cheating? Well, the response is to put very high penalties in place for anybody that doesn't comply with the regulation. Put people in jail, lock them up for a long time, and say, if you sell illegal substances on the street, which, by the way, the policy itself has created the incentives to make a lot of money by doing that, but you're going to ban that and then say, if you violate this, we're going to lock you up, we're going to penalize you in a big way, And then that's leading to some of the problems that we're facing in terms of our judicial system and our, number of people that are incarcerated in this country. The majority of them are there for drugs-related crimes rather than for violence or injury or theft or things of that sort. Okay, but they did violate rules and they're being punished. But our evaluation here can give us some insight as to why that actually arises. One thing that's true, and this is coming about now because of the legalization of less harmful drugs like marijuana, for example, in many states, is that proponents and opponents of this policy clearly differ as to the extent of the social cost. It's a good example of how it's really hard to measure how detrimental is, for example, use of marijuana by the population, and is it worth banning it in order to achieve a better social outcome. Many states have now decided, no, it's not in the best interest to do that. It's better to make it legal and to regulate it and to tax it and to collect money for governments in that particular way. But there are still many states that are following in line and saying, no, we still need to make it illegal. Okay? And that means that there's a difference in opinion about the extent of the social cost, but also it's very difficult to measure that social cost. It's hard to know exactly what those detrimental effects. So we can throw off all sorts of statistics. Well, it causes this, it causes that. But you need to be able to kind of evaluate them all together in order to know whether the cost exceeds the benefits that would arise by just legalizing and allowing it to happen. Okay, so I mentioned about illegality creates the high profits. It induces the cheating to take place, the illegal activity, and often it creates the enormous amount of profits that could come from taking those heavy risks and being willing to subject yourself to the potential penalty of imprisonment because the money you can make if you don't get caught is so high.